The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, December 12th, 2018 is now called to order. Please take a moment to silence your devices. Mr. Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Badami?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
And Vice Chair Hudis.
I would ask that everyone stand and join Commissioner O'Donnell in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As the Planning Commission conducts this meeting this evening on behalf of the Town of Los Gatos and the residents, we encourage active participation, which is essential for democracy and critical to the work of the Planning Commission. That participation can occur through written comments about the agenda items submitted to the staff prior to a meeting, which are always helpful and welcome. And also during our meeting, there are two opportunities for members of the public to participate. A, during the verbal communications period, an individual may speak on any topic not on the agenda, and during the hearing on a specific agenda item, any member of the public may speak about that item that is on the agenda. If you wish to address the Commission tonight during the verbal communication period or during the consideration of an agenda item, please complete a speaker card. Located in the back of the benches where you're seated. Turn the card into a staff member and please print your name clearly. When you speak, I ask that you come up to the podium and adjust the microphone so that you are speaking directly into it. Please state your name and address for the record. In fairness to all who want to speak at this meeting, it is requested that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, members of the Commission serve on several town committees. Are there any reports tonight? Commissioner Hanson.
Commissioner Birch, Commissioner Janoff, and I all sit on the General Plan Update Advisory Committee, and we had our second meeting last night. It's very early in the process. We just kicked off on October 30th with the General Plan Update Advisory Committee first meeting, and the goal would be to complete the General Plan Update by the 2020 timeframe when our current general plan will expire. But this is a really important update because we're going for 20 years, not 10. So we're trying to plan for things that we may not even know about it in the next 20 years. And what we've been doing is working on identifying what are some issues that we need to address in that timeframe and what are opportunities that we have. And then the next step will be in the early part of the new year, we'll get from our consultants a background existing conditions report that'll kind of look at what the future is going to be like in the area and also in Los Gatos. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
We had a CDAC meeting today at 4:30. We discussed one property, which is a property across the street from the North 40. Which doesn't face onto the boulevard. It faces a side street. We had a good, long discussion on what was proposed, which was 2 floors of residence and 1 floor, actually what is a small office. And as you know, that is only to give thoughts and feedback on the rough proposal, because that's not final either. But I thought it was a successful meeting. So we'll see what happens.
Great, thank you. Are there any matters that any commissioner wants to discuss before we launch into the meeting? Commissioner Birch.
Actually, it was just a point to piggyback on what Commissioner Hanson had just said. We are starting the general plan and are actively looking for the town and anyone who likes to do business in the town's involvement. So if you're interested in how the town is going to continue to develop, we ask that you check the town's website. There's a consultant who's doing work, taking surveys, looking for information from people not just on the downtown, but all over town. So if you or friends or family are talking about the town, please advise them to takes just a couple minutes to get on there, but they are bringing all that feedback to us at every meeting. And we know this is a very passionate town, so I encourage everyone to please check that and get involved.
Great, thank you. I attended the meeting also, and I think it's really a great opportunity to help define the future of the town and what we want the town to be like in another 10, 20 years. So I'm going to move on to verbal communications. I don't have any cards for this, but I'm going to invite members of the public to address the commission on any issue that's not on the agenda of tonight's meeting. Does anyone wish to speak on something that's not on the agenda? Okay. None seen. So now we move on to the consent calendar. And we have 3 items of consent to be acted upon in a single motion. Before the Planning Commission acts on the consent calendar, any member of the public or the commission may request that any item be removed from the consent agenda. At the chair's discretion, items removed may be considered either before or after the public hearings portion of the agenda. So the 3 items are, number 1, approval of the minutes, November 14, 2018. Number 2, adoption of the 2019 Planning Commission meeting schedule. And number 3, 248 Jared Lane, architecture and site application S-16-054, where the staff and applicant request that the item be continued to the January 9, 2019 meeting to provide additional time for the preparation and review of revised materials. Is there any discussion? Anyone wish to pull? And do we have a motion on the consent item? Commissioner Badami.
I move to approve the consent items number 1, number 2, and number 3.
Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Donnell. Thank you. I will now call the question. In favor? Opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with unanimously. So now we move on to the items that are new public hearings, and we will move on to agenda item number 4, which is 11 Peralta Avenue, minor residential development application MR-18-008, requesting approval for construction of an addition to an existing second story of a pre-1941 single-family residence on property zoned R-18, APN 510-42073, property owner Wendy Fan Kandasamy and applicant Tony Jeans. I believe we have an item here that was just provided on this. Mr. Paulson, did you want to speak about this?
Sure, thank you, and I will pass this out to the rest of the commission members. In the desk item, there was a desk item or the addendum, I can't remember anymore. There was some conversation about the noticing. The town's noticing was accurate, but there was some inaccuracies in some information that the applicant had proposed and sent out to neighbors, as well as one of the signs on the site. So the gist of this letter is that if the commission believes that that caused undue confusion and would like to continue the item to January 9th, that they're willing to accept that.
And just to be clear on this, the notice from the town, was that done properly?
That was, yes.
Okay. And the other question is the applicant, what's their opinion about a postponement?
So the applicant is Mr. Jeans, who submitted the letter. So the appellant, I believe that was discussed with them, but you could confirm that. And it's not officially an appellant, but the neighbor with the objections.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Birch.
And am I correct in reading this very quickly that it wasn't just the notice that they put out, the signage on the property also had the wrong date? So perhaps people that were outside of the notice area that just walked by would have seen the wrong date also?
Yeah, it had the wrong date in one location and the right date in another.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
It seems to me the risk here is much more on the applicant than it is on us. If, in fact, subsequent to this hearing, someone raises the question they didn't know because they were essentially misled, even though inadvertently. If I were the applicant, I wouldn't want that to occur. So I guess the letter from Mr. Jeans is, if we think, and I guess I would defer before we make a decision, but I would defer to them and see if they don't think it should be continued so they don't run that risk. So that's a little unusual because I am asking for input from the applicant.
Okay. So we would have to configure the hearing so that we heard from the applicant on that if we were to get a direct answer on that. Let me just see if there's any other comments.
I don't think
Yes,
so.
Mr. Schultz.
So from a legal standpoint, yes, we have met all of our notice requirements as required under the government code, but certainly there could well be confusion out there, and I think the last thing the town wants is for people to show up on December 22nd thinking there was a hearing and no one to be here. Even though I think that's a Friday. Or a Saturday, but it still could be confusing. People might have just saw the 22nd and said, okay, I got plenty of time to look at this later and go on the website and not be there. So there certainly is the confusion. But from our standpoint, we have met it. It seems like the applicant does wanted input from you. You could open up the public hearing just for that limited purpose, just to ask a couple of questions. You would be opening it up for anybody else for that limited purpose. If you decide to move forward, then they would have the opportunity to present their project.
Yes, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just one more comment before we perhaps open it up. As you know, I practiced law for a long time, and this is the kind of thing that if I were the applicant, I would not want to go forward. It would be a great waste of effort if it comes up again. So no matter what the applicant says, we may decide to the contrary, but I would nevertheless invite opening to get comment from the applicant and whoever else wants to comment on that.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Hanson?
I would have real concerns if anybody was misled by this, because you always want to have the maximum amount of public input. So if there's any possibility that anyone that walked by and saw the wrong date and saw that and thought that they didn't need to make comments until December 22nd, I would hate to miss that. So I would be in favor of the postponement, but I'm willing to hear what the applicant says.
Okay. Commissioner Birch.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Hanson, especially once I realized it was in two spots, not just the things that were mailed out, but the signage. I know a lot of people walk by and look at that, and if it was confusing, I could see us having a number of upset residents. I would be okay with postponing.
Okay, so I'm going to exercise discretion of the chair and open the hearing for limited response from the applicant. And so if the applicant would like to respond, in the letter that we received, it says, accordingly, if the commission and legal counsel feel that the public was not sufficiently informed as to this hearing, I would accept a postponement of the hearing to January 9. Could you give us a response to that offer and whether you would be agreeable to that? You can go ahead and step up and state your name, please.
So I'm Tony Jeans. That was the letter that I wrote. Like I said, I made a mistake writing a note for my assistant who misread my 12 for 22 and sent out a wrong letter to 66 neighbors. 2 days later, we sent out a corrected letter with it in red saying, hey, it's the 12th. A couple of people we sent emails to instead of letters, but pretty much the same people were all notified. The notice on the street, again, prepared by my assistant, had the 22nd in 2 locations. I asked her to change it, and she saw the one at the top, the 12th, changed it correctly, and left the one in the middle. I don't want there to be any confusion. I don't want anyone to come up and say, I saw that, I didn't have an opportunity, and therefore appeal it to the town council, because I don't see that they would have another option. So my my vote would be to postpone it to a date certain, preferably January the 9th, for safety for all people. But again, I apologize for the screw-up. I apologize to all the people here who have come out unnecessarily, and hopefully you'll come again if it is postponed.
Thank you, Mr. Jeans.
Thank you.
That helps. So we'll close, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we would leave it open for this limited purpose, so just on the continuance, not on the merits of the case.
My name is John Fox. I'm the neighbor in opposition at 9 Peralta, in opposition to the 11 Peralta project. Two things. One, I put in your desk item yesterday, I believe it was, a letter in which there was actual confusion by a neighbor outside the notice area who questioned me in my yard on Sunday afternoon about which date was operative. He had actual confusion and was interested in the project for some reason. I don't know the gentleman. He was just walking his dog. Second, I would ask that if we postpone it, that it be to the next date after January 9th. I'm in New York City on the 9th of January, and I'd very much like to be here for this hearing.
Okay, thank you. So I will now close the.
I think you got another
we
one.
have another comment. Okay, thank you.
I have no objection to the postponing of the hearing. However, I will not be here on January 9th, and I had planned to speak today. So if you do postpone it to January 9th, I would like the opportunity to speak before you adjourn.
Would you be here on the 23rd? Which is the following? Is
Of January, it's questionable. I may not be back until the 25th.
Thank you. May I ask Mr. Fox and Mr. Jeans to respond to the possibility of the 9th and the 23rd, please?
I think we've heard from Mr. Fox that the 9th wouldn't work, the 23rd
Correct.
would. So we can hear from the applicant.
23rd is acceptable.
Okay. Thank you. Now I will close the public portion of the public hearing. And so, Commissioner O'Donnell.
If the chair would entertain it, I would like to make a motion that we continue the matter until the 23rd of January for the reasons we have previously discussed, and with the consent of the applicant, and also taking into account those who have appeared, except for the one person, which apparently will have a difficulty, but, okay, well, we can't, nonetheless, it seems to me our choice is the 9th or the 23rd, and I've not found out whether the 9th is even available, but I know that Mr. Fox is right next door. I don't know where everybody else is. Okay. I guess the problem is I think we have a choice between the 9th and the 23rd. I don't think we should postpone it till February or something like that. So I would like to hear what my fellow commissioners say, but my motion would be that we continue it to the 23rd.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Badami?
I would second it to the 23rd, with just mentioning that for those that may be out of town, that they provide written comments, because with your written comments, you can certainly provide more than 3 minutes worth of verbal testimony than if you were to be here.
Right, thank you. And I just wanted to clarify for Mr. Schultz that we will be able to accept written comments up until the night of the continuance.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Very good. So I think that's a great suggestion, and we're happy to take that. Since it's a continuance, it is not re-noticed in the same way that the original is, but it's continued.
What we will do is ask the applicant to modify the property signs to reflect the new date.
Yeah. Okay. So let's vote on this now. Can we call the question, please? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Opposed? Passes unanimously, 6-0. Okay, thank you very much for your patience with the rescheduling. We appreciate that, and I think that we're ready to move on to the next item. The next item is item 5, Item 5 is 14320 Arnrich Road, Architecture and Site Application S-18-010, Conditional Use Permit U-18-007, requesting approval for demolition of an existing single-family residence, construction of a new single-family residence, removal of large protected trees, and approval of a conditional use permit for agricultural farming activities greater than 3,000 square feet on property zoned HR 20, APN 537-11-034, property owner Philip and Shoshana Oriner, and applicant Gary Colsat. Project planner is Jocelyn Schupman. May I have a show of hands from the commissioners who visited the property under consideration? Okay. Are there any disclosures regarding those visits? I have one disclosure. Actually, I do not. Thank you. It was on the other item. Okay, so we're ready for a staff report. Ms. Schupman, I understand you'll be giving the staff report this evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice Chair. The subject property is located on the south side of Arnrich Road, and it's developed with an existing single-family residence currently. The 16.31-acre parcel is surrounded by single-family homes and county land to the west. The project is being considered by the Planning Commission because the proposed residence would exceed 5,000 square feet in gross floor area, and approval of the conditional use permit for agricultural farming activities over 3,000 square feet. In addition, the project is also requesting the following exceptions to the hillside development standards and guidelines, which include grading exceeding the maximum allowable cut and fill depths and driveway slopes in excess of 15%. The proposed residence at 5,216 square feet of countable floor area would be the second largest home in the immediate neighborhood. A 1,152 square foot detached barn is also proposed and related to the farm and farm-related tasks. A 484 square foot detached garage is also proposed at the entrance of the property to serve as a garage for a future accessory dwelling unit. A loop driveway is proposed to extend from the existing driveway up the property to the location for the proposed residence and detached barn, traversing back down the property along an existing fire road to Arnrich Road. The staff report provides a summary of the review by the town's consulting architect, who had no recommendations for changes to the project, in addition to review by the town's consulting arborist, with 13 trees proposed to be removed based on the improvements. An agricultural use, except for dairying, is a permitted use in the hillside zone. The applicant's request for agricultural farming activities includes vegetable gardens, herbs, flowers, mixed fruit orchards, as well as livestock, which requires a conditional use permit. A detailed discussion of the applicant's proposed farming technique is discussed in the staff report, as well as Exhibits 7 and 8. An addendum report has been distributed to the Commission, which provides a project information sheet provided by the Parks and Public Works Department. Based on the analysis provided in the staff report, staff recommends approval of the architecture and site application and conditional use permit application subject to the conditions included in Exhibit 4. This completes staff's presentation, and we are available along with Parks and Public Works staff for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Schupman. Are there any questions of staff from the commissioners? Commissioner Hanson.
I did have a question. It was because we haven't heard an application about farming with this level of detail for CUP. The exception is for dairying. What is the definition of dairying in our code?
So dairying is not permitted under the agricultural use in the hillside zone. The farming, which they're proposing, the herbs, the gardens, and the small livestock is allowed. Let me see if we have a definition for dairying.
I had a specific reason for asking because in the applicant's own presentation, they talked about having 15 goats and doing milk. And so I thought that sounded like dairying to me, but I don't know what it means. Maybe it's if you don't sell it or... So that's what that's the answer I was looking for is,
So Section 4 of the town code relates to animals, and that section does define goats as being allowed as part of the small livestock farming.
even if it's being used for dairying?
Looks like we might need a little research time
Okay,
on that
I
question.
can wait for an answer.
While we're waiting for that, I had another question, if I may, for staff. There was a suggestion in the letter from Mr. Colsat on page 3 of 5 about the amount of grading that's required, and discussion about the fire truck turnout. And so the letter states, if the fire department would allow, this turnout could be moved approximately 100 feet and require much less grading. So my question for staff is, has this option of moving it been explored with the fire department?
Yes, the option was reviewed by the fire department, and they were not in favor of granting exception to that requirement for turnouts.
Okay, great. Thank you for your answer on that. Okay. I think we can probably wait for the answer on dairying if that still needs some more research.
We don't have a definition in the town code for dairying that's in the zoning code. I'll check the bigger code.
Okay. All right then, so let's move on to the public portion of the public hearing. Yes.
I'd like to ask a question of council and staff. If the goats are permitted use, why are we worrying about dairying? I don't know what a dairying applies to, and apparently you guys don't either at the moment, but we're not talking about cows, we're talking about what you just told us, I think, wasn't included in a permitted use. So I'm not sure what the pending question is. It's all very interesting to know what dairying is, but if it has nothing to do with tonight, I'm not sure we have to sit around and wait.
Does staff want to respond to that?
The person of the question, we would, if there's no definition in our code for dairying, we would go and look at our common law definition of that for framing, but I don't know how it pertains to this permit either.
Okay, all I'm saying is if it doesn't pertain to the permit, I don't think we should, okay. I guess I'm really asking you, if it's a permitted use, then we don't have to worry about whether it's dairying, because it's not. It's a permitted use after the code said dairying is not a permitted use. You can't have it both ways, in my simple mind anyway.
So I think the answer to all of this may require a little more research. I suggest that we table that topic until we get to the discussion portion of our agenda. And if it becomes relevant based on staff's answer to the question, then we can take it up at that time, if that's okay. All right, so I'd like to move on to the public portion of the public hearing and give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 10 minutes. And I have card, first one is Mr. Philip O'Reiner, is that correct? Have I pronounced that name correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Could you just give your address, please, and then go ahead and get started with your presentation. You have 10 minutes.
Sure. My name is Rabbi Philip O'Reiner. I cordially invite anyone to ask me about dairying when we reach that part. Be happy to help out a little bit there. As I said, my name is Rabbi Philip O'Reiner. It's my pleasure to introduce my wife, Rabbi Shoshana O'Reiner. It's important to note that our kids begged us to be here tonight to present our family's dream to you. It's a bit past their bedtime, so Grandpa's hopefully holding down the fort with them. For over 15 years, it's been our dream to embark on a journey as a family in elevating our highest value to the forefront of our life and work. After a meaningful decade of communal service through the rabbinate, being a rabbi, we decided as a family to embark upon building Ma'alot Farms. We're excited to share that vision with you tonight and gain the Planning Commission's approval of not just a house or a road, but rather a holistic endeavor meticulously designed to conserve and regenerate the beauty, biodiversity, and robust ecology of a small piece of the Los Gatos hillside at 14320 Arnerich Road. Over a 2.5-year period, we explored numerous properties throughout Silicon Valley and the Santa Cruz Mountains. Ultimately, this plot, a beautiful confluence of majestic oak forest, meadow, and a dying walnut orchard, simply called to us. The property is rural, neighborly, removed from the hustle and bustle of downtown Los Gatos, and it's environs where our children attend school, and surrounded by vineyards, raw land, and the Sierra Azul Open Space Preserve. Of all the myriad properties we looked at, this property is best suited for creating a regenerative and sustainable ecosystem as a platform for our life's mission and helping others in the greater San Jose area gain skills for living and resiliency. In short, our vision is to create a permaculture-based homestead, leveraging the use of perennial plants to build environmental resilience and regeneration, sequester carbon, increase biodiversity, bolster fire resistance, enrich and stabilize the land, all while providing sustenance for us and others. We also look forward to helping our neighbors and fellow community members in incorporating some of these techniques and practices into their own lives in easy, affordable, and impactful ways. In fact, we've had the great pleasure to meet with most of our neighbors multiple times, and all seem very excited to be a part of this with us and to benefit from the bounty, abundance, and conservancy skills and techniques that we're looking to bring not just to our property, but to our entire area. We're mindful of the rich agricultural history of Los Gatos and the greater San Jose area and seek to help preserve those roots and our collective local heritage. However, it's important to note that our homestead will not look anything like a traditional farm with row crops or even straight lines and cultivated look you might see in a vineyard or traditional orchard. Shoshana is showing you the difference between a traditional orchard and what a food forest looks like in a permaculture environment. Certainly the property poses plenty of challenges, particularly in designing access and shelter. It was imperative to site the house and barn in a central location on the property with line of sight and easy access to our food forest and orchards, where we and our livestock will be spending the majority of our time each day working with the land. The driveway is critical to providing access to the breadth of the property for ease of moving small equipment, starts, and harvest with ease. We're blessed to have assembled a top-notch team of geologists, geohydrologists, arborists, scientists, and an internationally renowned permaculture design firm to help us build Malot farms. I'm going to turn the microphone over to some of the members of our team to address some of the finer architectural and engineering details.
Thank you, Philip. Very articulate. I'm not quite so. You know me, I'm Gary Colsett, the architect for this project. And we also have Amanda, who's our civil engineer, if you have any technical questions on grading or drainage or anything like that. For sure, it's an understatement to say that this is a challenging property. It's one of the most challenging properties I've ever worked on, mostly due to the site, but also several other constraints. As we tried to explain with our exhibits, there are 2 trace faults that have been found, crossing about midway through the property, and they follow the contour of the property. There's also a large swath of a potential landslide that runs down the better half of the western part of the property from top to bottom. Add to that, we have a lot of slope that's over 30%. So if you know what LRDA is, a least restricted development area, that's defined by slopes of less than 30%. And so taking all those things into consideration, we had very few places to locate the house. And unfortunately, where I wanted to locate the house was on a flatter portion right on top of the faults. So that wasn't an option. So we looked at the next possible location to sliding it down, and with the blessing of not only our geologist, but the town's peer review consultant, we have agreed on some setbacks to these fault lines, which were discovered, by the way, with trenching. And this location that we placed the house seems to be the right spot for multiple reasons. One, it preserved the few oak trees that were in this portion of the property, and we can use those as screening. And it also gave us the benefit of the view for this property. Has a slight view looking down into the Santa Clara Valley. You don't see Los Gatos at all, but you do see San Jose. And so that's exciting, but it's also, as Philip mentioned, it's centrally located on the property, which is super important for them because they need to get all the way around this property for their farming reasons. I want to say that locating non-habitable structures like barns and garages is permitted. So if you're questioning why we've located some structures in the fault zones, that is allowed by law. So that's where we've taken advantage of the siting for that. If you will, we've kind of taken a clustered approach. So when you do subdivisions, one of the techniques that is suggested in the hillside standards is to cluster the homes. And so this is kind of a play on that, where we're putting the buildings closer together so you don't have buildings dotted around the property. Also, well, let me talk about the house real quick. This house has a reverse floor plan that's built on the slope, so you're going to enter on the upper level. All the living areas are on that to take advantage of the views and also the light that goes up the hill. We plan on doing some small terracing up the hill, which is shown on the plan, for some patios. We also have bedrooms down below. This home is parallel with the contours, and it fits with the height limits, and also was reviewed by Larry Cannon, and he had no recommendations. He was in favor of the house as designed. The story poles, if you notice, kind of illustrate how small the house looks on this property. It's a large property, and the house is at close to the limit of our 5,400 square feet, or 5,000 minus the garage. But what puts us over the FAR for tonight is a detached garage down at the bottom of the hill for our future ADU that we're going to plan. We needed approval from you, planning commissioners, to get the extra square footage for that. We initially had our ADU on the plan, but staff recommended that we pull it because just to keep things clear as far as discretionary review of ADUs. The road itself was walked several times by us, the civil engineers, owners, and it felt so much more natural to follow these old dirt roads that were cut into this property, who knows when, probably from the orchard time. And so we basically planned the majority of our road by that. We did look at options to reduce some of the slope, but they increased the length of the driveway so much, and we were trying to minimize those lengths. We do have a 16% slope in some areas, which is barely noticeable above 15%. And we have the turnouts required. This loop does facilitate access throughout the property. And I just wanted to talk one more thing about the barn, that we were questioned about alternate locations for the barn, and we explored some of those. This one works, as I put in my letter, for several reasons, but the one most important reason is that this will be housing the goats, and the goats will be grazing in the pasture, which is the oak forests. And if we locate this barn anywhere else on the other side of the house, down the road, they'll have to cross roads, and it's not as easy to let them out into pasture. So there's many reasons why we have the barn where we have it, not to mention the vertical separation and the distance it would take to get to this barn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colsat. Are there any questions from the commission for Mr. Colsat or Mr. O'Reiner? Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, thank you. Question about the loop driveway. Do you know what percentage of the driveway exceeds the 15% slope limit?
We have a highlighted map that shows, I can show you graphically. I don't know what the length of it, how much the percentage of it is.
That'd be great.
I will try to get it to fit. Thank you. I don't know if the colors are coming through, but this section is technically 16%, and this section is 16%. It's a good majority of it if you look at it. This is the other half of the property, which it just shows a little bit more. So it's I would guesstimate it's 66%. Yes.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Hanson.
I heard all the comments about the, why the barn is where it is, but as was mentioned in the staff report, there is a difference in amount of cut and fill required if the barn were somewhere else. So I just wanted to understand what the difference would be relative to the, to know kind of what we're missing if we, go the route that does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
We're asking for an exception to the cut for the barn by an additional 4 feet, 5 inches or something. You're allowed to cut up to 4 feet for accessory structures. Garages, you're allowed to cut 8 feet. So what we're asking you to treat this as a garage. The other location that we looked at would have probably 3 or 4 feet of cut and 4 feet of fill. This one has no fill, it's full cut. So it's a similar amount if you look at the balance of the cut and fill versus purely cut. And it just still does come at quite a cost to the occupants.
Right, I understand.
Not to the goats, but to the caretakers.
Right. It was clear, that they would have to walk further and all that stuff. But so what you're saying is that the balance of cut and fill, the amount of dirt that would be being moved wouldn't be that different. It just might be that there would be less cut.
The overall earthwork would be similar.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of that we're asking for more in one of the two, the cut instead of the cut and the fill.
Okay.
So,
And then I had one question about the retention pond. I was just curious, I understand the benefit, environmental benefit of it, but I was curious with the retention pond and standing water, with all the issues we have, what happens with mosquitoes? Because it's a big issue in Santa Clara County, standing water. So.
Yeah, the way these retention ponds work in a permaculture environment is using biology and ecology to minimize any kind of invasive species. Essentially what you do is you use tractors to bring biodiversity. When you have open cisterns without plant life around it, that's when you wind up with a problem of one species over another. But the cistern, along with every other aspect of the project, is meant to bring ecologic balance. And that's what we'll be seeking to do at the cistern, and mitigate whatever overabundance of one species we have by ensuring we have the right plant-based species to bring their predators.
So basically what you're saying is because you're planting all around the retention pond, that will mitigate the attraction of mosquitoes to the area.
That's how it works, but you have to observe, and it takes give and take with it, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, I have a question relating to the consulting architect's report on page 3. And this is the house design with regard to the grade. And he says that the house does not step with the grade as called for in the town's hillside development standards and guidelines. However, I believe the deep porch elements on the downhill side of the house and materials which should blend the home into the hillside would achieve the objective of those guidelines. I just wonder whether you considered a design that would step with the hillside as specifically spelled out in the guidelines.
We looked at that, but what we did is we chose to narrow the house, so to minimize the overall impact on the hill. It's cut in, so it's got the basement on the bottom part behind, half of the basement, half the lower floor is basement. The upper hill is the upper part of the property is cut back a little bit. It doesn't step 100%, but we're using basements to accomplish that. If we didn't have the basement, it would essentially step to the terrain.
Okay, thank you. No other questions. I had one other one, which is about the viewing platforms. In our hillside design guidelines, there's a requirement of the way the structure presents itself to the viewing platforms. You said that this has a view of San Jose, so does that mean that it's not visible from any of the Los Gatos viewing platforms, and it would therefore only be visible from San Jose?
That's exactly correct. Yes. You
Okay.
cannot see Los Gatos at all.
Okay.
Not
thank
even
you.
the viewing platforms especially, but you can't even see any portion of the town.
Okay, and we have no purview over San Jose, so, okay. Any other questions? Okay, so,
No one wants to know about Darien?
thank you. You will have another opportunity if you'd like. We'll now invite comments from members of the public. If you haven't turned in a speaker card, go ahead and do so. I don't have any. I just have the applicant and his architect. So if no one from the public would like to speak on this, then we have an additional 5 minutes for the applicant, if there's anything you'd like to add or address that may have come up.
So I'll go first. I just wanted to say that we've been working on this project for over a year with the town. We submitted in November, I believe, of 2017. And over and over and over and over again, Mr. Bagley hounded us on grades and retaining wall heights and this and that. And we kept saying, why are you being so harsh on us? Why are you being so picky and with the magnifying glass and everything? And he goes, because I want to make sure that everything you're doing is up to snuff, you know? You've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's, and as big of a pain in the you-know-what it was, I think in the end it helps us to stand up here today with the complete confidence that the town has 100% vetted this project. So.
Okay.
I'll say one word about dairying, which is that dairying almost always refers to cattle. Goats produce a fraction of the milk. We will be milking the goats, so there is dairy product involved, but it's for us and our family on a small scale that doesn't even meet the criteria for, for any other approvals that you might need to do that.
So I appreciate your response to my earlier question, and that was what I was wondering, is if you're going to sell it and it's just for your family's use.
At this point, it will be just solely be for our use.
And I looked up the definition, and that's exactly what it talks about. It talks about the producing, storing, and distribution of milk products, doing a business. If there's any concern by the commission, although it's prohibited to begin with, but if you wanted to put that in the condition, you could put that in the condition that no dairying is allowed.
Okay, thank you. We will now close the public portion of the public hearing and ask if the commissioners have any further questions of staff, wish to comment on the application. Commissioner Birch.
I just had a question of staff, kind of a bit more procedurally. It is exceeding the 5,000 square foot because of the second, the garage that's down lower. It's about 480, or 580, I think, square feet. Since that is actually a garage, it's for a future dwelling, how procedurally does that go? We'll see another application come in if they decide to do another unit, or could you just walk me through that?
Sure. So, pardon me. So the maximum allowable floor area for the residence is 6,000 square feet plus 400 square feet of exempt floor area for a garage. So the second garage that's proposed at the entrance to the property, staff worked with the applicant and gave them options to either include it as part of their application now or potentially have to come in at a future time for a minor residential application since the accessory structure exceeded 450 square feet. In addition, if they did go the route of a minor residential, they would be over 5,000 square feet gross floor area, which which would then trigger them to come to Planning Commission at that time. So the applicant chose to include that garage as part of the application now.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Commissioner Hanson.
I actually had almost the same question, and this is for a future application, but the statement from the architect was something along the lines of the plan for the future, caretaker's cottage was going to be 1,300 square feet. So, I mean, if this is a future application, but wouldn't that would trigger a return to Planning Commission, would not?
So accessory dwelling units are ministerial applications, meaning that they would not come before a public hearing. So they're approved at a staff level.
Because of the changes that we made in our ADU policy to facilitate them getting done.
Correct.
But just to add to that, you mentioned 1,300 square feet. We don't allow 1,300 square feet, so that would not be possible. 1,200 would be the maximum. And if they go the ADU route, then it would not come back to you. However, if they look to the caretaker's residence, because they may not meet all of our ADU requirements, then we go down that option. That could come back before the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there comments or discussion? Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment overall on the proposal. I think it's a wonderful example of how thoughtful land use makes really good sense, and it's good for the town. It's good for the biology. It just makes sense all around. The concern, I think, that I have has to do with the removal of, all of the soil. But if I think about the project in its entirety, typically what we see when we have objections to removal as a result of the cut and fill is because what's happening to the property overall is sort of like a lot of hardscape and a lot of modifications that aren't integral to the land and the land use. So for me, the purpose of your farm counterbalances by far the amount of soil that's being disturbed above the recommended percentages. So I think this makes sense overall. It's a wonderful example of what can be done. You've got a wonderfully generous amount of land to work with, and I think this is a great example of how small-scale farms can be incorporated into the community and just really start to get some energy around that thoughtful kind of land use.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Birch.
I completely agree. We do, you are asking for a couple of exceptions in the hillside, but being where the property is located and the fact that I thought you had a good question about the view platforms, it feels like what you're asking for is honestly just making a better use for the overall site because it is a difficult, very difficult lot. I'm happy to continue saying nice things, or I could actually try to venture a motion if I can find my... Thank you. All right. Are we recommending?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I recommend approval of architectural and site application S-18-010 and conditional use permit U-18-007 at 14320 Arnerick, I'm going to say that wrong, Road, requesting approval for demolition of an existing single-family residence and construction of a new single-family residence, removal of large protected trees, and approval of a conditional use permit for agricultural farming activities. And I can make those findings that the project is categorically exempt. Pursuant to the adopted guidelines for the implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and Section 15304, minor alterations to land, shown in Exhibits 2 and 3. I can make the finding that due to the constraints of the site, exceptions to the maximum cut and fill depth and driveway slope are appropriate, and the project is otherwise in compliance with the applicable sections of the hillside development standards, also shown in Exhibit 2. And I think with that, I would also make the note for any future questions that there was an option for the drive to be changed that was reviewed by the fire department, and they did not want to make that change, which probably would have altered this exemption. I can make the finding that the project complies with the hillside specific plan, shown in Exhibit 2. Make the required considerations as required by Section 29.20.150 of the Town Code for granting approval of an architectural and site application, also in Exhibit 2. Make the findings as required by Section 29.20.190 of the Town Code for granting approval of a conditional use permit, Exhibit 3, and approval of the architectural and site application S-18-010 and conditional use permit U-18-007 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 4 and the development plans in Exhibit 14. That's a lot.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Donnell? Commissioner O'Donnell, you second? Okay, thank you. Is there any more discussion that anyone would like to have before we call the question? Okay, so I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes, there are no no's, then passes unanimously 6-0. Thank you. And Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights regarding this item?
There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision to the Town Council. Forms are available in the clerk's office. There's a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Paulson, do you have a report on community development?
Just very briefly, last week the council introduced a portion of the fence ordinance regulations. Didn't include the specific hillside regulations, which will be going back to the policy committee next Thursday. And so that will go for second reading on the 18th, I believe, for that first portion of the fencing.
So will there still be discussion on next Thursday?
Next Thursday, there will be discussion on the hillside, specifically the direction from the policy committee at the last meeting was to turn the fence and wall sections of the hillside guidelines into code language. So we have attempted to do that, and we'll be forwarding it to that to them for their discussion and then next steps and direction.
And it might have to come back to you if those changes are a tremendous amount of changes from when you last reviewed it. The government code requires you to look at it again. So we'll have to make that determination on whether you have to look at it again.
Okay.
And lastly, I would say, besides that, something to look forward to. I hope everyone enjoys the holiday season.
And I have one more that council did, though. You'll see a change on your agenda, the council matters or the commissioner matters, that where you talk about anything that happened, or in the historical commission, when you talk about that at the beginning, that's moved to the end of the agenda. So they did a change in the order of agenda, and so you'll see that at the end of your agenda instead of the beginning of your agenda.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for participating in this meeting. On behalf of the commission, I would like to hope that you had a wonderful Hanukkah and that you have the best for the upcoming holidays. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year, and please stay safe. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.